with Shaken Bacons. Today I have the privilege of reviewing a film before it releases in the US, which is very exciting. Winter Ridge releases September 18th, and it's a film from the UK. It's already won a couple awards, including the Best UK Feature from the London Independent Film Festival, which is pretty cool. I'm honored that I was contacted to actually get to see this before it comes out. So let's talk about Winter Ridge. Now, before I dive into it, for anyone who's watching who has not seen this, because I believe it's out already in the UK, I am not going to be discussing spoilers. So if you have not seen this yet, you don't need to worry. I'm going to be doing a non-spoilers review for you. This film is directed by Dom Lenoir. This is actually the first film of his I've seen. He's credited with 2 others. It was written by Ross Owen Williams, and it stars Matt Hookings, Hannah Waddingham, Olwen Catherine Kelly, Michael McKell, and more. Winter Ridge is the story of a detective in a smaller town in England who loses his wife to a coma following a car accident that she is in that was caused by a drunk driver. At the same time he's going through this personal tragedy, there's a series of killings that start to unfold within this town that are linked specifically to the elderly population there. And he begins working on the case while at the same time hoping for the recovery of his wife from her coma. What's really interesting about this film is a lot of detective thriller type films tend to focus on really scintillating, sensational events happening to sensational people in order to sell themselves. And in this film, it's sort of the opposite side of the detective world that's uncovered. It's more what you would consider a normal case at first. It's people investigating what's going on with an elderly population. Some of them are having Alzheimer's or dementia or memory issues. They're things that everyone in their life in reality encounter at some point or another. And instead of focusing on something just insanely out of this world, this film focuses on something that's really closer to home, and that directly ties in with what happens with the detective, who's played by Matt Hookings, as the primary character in this story. Now, this film did a great job at highlighting the isolation and the beauty and the scenery and the positions of these people within it in this area of England. And I have to say, it's very nice to see a setting other than London for England. Now, don't get me wrong, London's wonderful, but it's nice to have other parts of England showcased as well. And this is a part of England that I had never seen before. And it's definitely interesting to focus on a different set of characters and their lives in a different area that is not tied to the hustle and bustle of a behemoth city. As the story unfolds, you get to see that the topic presented results in a very interesting moral dilemma for the primary detective as he's attempting to solve this case and as he's attempting to hope for the recovery of his wife. And it's a very interesting topic to address, especially within a movie. This way, it reminds me actually to a degree of My Sister's Keeper, in that it's discussing an issue that many people find uncomfortable and movies often don't want to touch, because people tend to go to movies for escapism, but film is also an avenue for people to get a message across or instigate discussion or encourage an issue to come to the forefront. And this does that. It does not shy away from it, and I think that that is fantastic. Something else I appreciate about this film, the question is raised that are the bad guys in the story truly the bad guys? Because this issue is such a gray area, and if I delve into it, it's going to give away the major plot line, and I don't want to do that for you if you're planning on seeing this movie. I won't go into it, but what I will say is that it's addressing a very difficult topic, and they do a great job of tying in the main character's personal situation with the topic of the series of murders that he's trying to solve. And I love ambiguity in films as well. Like, you guys know I love me an unhappy ending, and I love it when things are left unresolved. And that is to an extent the case in this film as well. Is it a happy ending? I think arguably it's not a happy ending. There's emotional closure to the ending. And I think that if you watch this film, you're going to walk away with questions and you're going to walk away thinking about it. That is something that many films strive for and that they don't always achieve. Granted, it's not a perfect film. Some of the behaviors of the character of the detective in the story don't quite make sense. There are moments where he ignores common sense or things that one would assume would be instinctive for somebody in that position, and it leaves you questioning why he would have done that, especially when it opens him up to trouble in a very obvious scenario. There are conclusions and progressions in the film that I had difficulty following. There's a scene where he somehow knows that there's going to be a very specific construction photo that is relevant to the case, that at the time the photo was taken, there's no indication he would have even known that the photo existed or that it would be tied to a crime or relevant in any way. So in some areas, I felt like there was a little bit of inconsistency throughout the movie. And there were some unanswered questions I had when finishing the movie as well. For example, there's a death of one victim that very patently does not match the deaths of the other victims, and it's never actually fully explained why that is. It's brushed over to an extent at the climax of the movie, but it's never fully explained, and there are other threads that don't get quite as tied up as I would have liked to have seen. There is a very heavy use of exposition in order to resolve the plot line. One thing that they did do that very much so complemented the film was the use of the music. The music in the film was very well chosen, and I think complemented the action scenes. It complemented the introspection of the detective as he's trying to piece things together and figure things out. It complemented the interactions that he has with the other people in the town and how they are feeling about the situation that's unfolding. I will admit that the story overall is kind of predictable. It's pretty easy to guess early on who is behind the killings. As you travel toward the conclusion, the twists and turns that the film takes to get there are not predictable. You can't guess the path that it's going to take, and that's where this film really does a good job. For me, I think in terms of acting, Michael McKell shone above everyone else. Every scene that he was in, I felt he did an amazing job. It was definitely interesting for me to see Hannah Waddingham in this film because I had previously only seen her in Game of Thrones as the shame nurse. And her acting was pretty good for the most part. She and Michael McKell, I think, did very well. Matt Hookings as the star, I have conflicting feelings about. And the reason I say this is because his body language as an actor is on point. The way he carries himself and the way he comported himself and his movements were just about perfect, I think, but his face didn't really have a lot of expression on it. And it was very odd to me to see someone clearly acting with their full being, but it not showing on their face. But to be fair, I think that it could have been because he was playing someone who was having a lot of emotional stress. And in terms of his new detective partner in the film, I think Justin Mcdonald has the potential to grow into being a very, very good actor if he nails his timing. You can see that he feels the character as he's portraying it, and he has the skill, but he needs to adjust his delivery. And when I say his delivery, I don't mean how he comes across, I mean when he comes across. I think that the backup characters and the supporting actors in this did a great job. And I really enjoyed that they showcase people that are older, because I do feel like films frequently focus on a younger generation. You don't get to see a lot of older people in movies. And it's interesting because you'd think that that would be something that film companies would want to include for their audiences, because I don't know about you guys, but whenever I go to the movies, I see a lot of elderly people. They're retired, they can go whenever they really please to because they're not constrained by a job or strict schedules. It was nice to see that they really highlighted the role of an older generation in this film, both in the storyline, in the issues that they are facing, and in the actors that they brought in. Winter Ridge is definitely an interesting thriller, and the points and the questions that it raises about its main subject matter, and it's going to continue to engage viewers after they leave the theater, and for that I have to give it major props. So if you are into thrillers and you're into detective movies and mysteries, I think you would definitely enjoy this movie. It's a great glimpse of how a thriller set in the UK goes down, and I think it's a wonderful highlight of how people in different locales respond to tragedy and respond to these moral dilemmas with which they're faced. And honestly, I mean, the scenery highlighted in this film, in the scenic shots for the time lapses and the location establishments that they used are so beautiful. I'm tempted to try and find an Airbnb in that area and get my pennies together and go visit, because this movie is a great advertisement for that town, man. So anyway, on my movie rating scale, I have to give Winter Ridge a 70%. If you like movies that make you think and that touch on topics that aren't the norm, then I think you should definitely check out Winter Ridge when you can. Do you enjoy films that make you keep thinking about them after you leave the theater? Or do you just prefer total escapism in movies? Or do you like a healthy balance? I think I like a healthy balance. I hope you guys are doing amazingly, and I will catch you later.